I just wanted to check.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
I'll tell you, if it's not, say no, nice and loud. Okay. So,
Yeah, we've got it. Thank you.
question. What's a prophet? You got 5 major prophets, 13 minor prophets, the books, I mean.
What? Somebody who speaks for the Lord.
I'm sorry, Barb?
Somebody who speaks for the Lord.
Okay. Somebody who speaks for the Lord. All right, good. What else? Anybody want to add?
A lot of times it was prophetic messages that they gave.
Right, it was prophetic. So they would be foretelling the future, right?
Mhm.
Something that was going to happen down the line. Yep. What else? What do we see many times when the prophet is speaking and saying, here's what the people need to know. He says, thus
Says the Lord.
Lord, right? Yeah. So I kind of talk about it as prophets both forthtell and foretell, right? But it's all thus says the Lord, whether they're foretelling something that's going to happen in the future or they're talking about what's happening right now. And very often in the Old Testament, the prophet's life was not an easy one, all right? Jeremiah had the job of telling the folks in Jerusalem, Babylonian army's coming with King Nebuchadnezzar. It's futile to fight. Soldiers, you should lay down your arms, just go on give up, surrender. You're going to be carried off to Babylon, whether you fight or not. And this is God's edict against you for your faithlessness. So they threw him into a well for that, and left him down there for a while. And when he started going around, God told him, put on a big old yoke that they put on oxen and go around telling the people this is what's going to happen because, you're yoking yourselves with other nations, with other gods. So that's tough. How would you like to have been the first minor prophet, Hosea? Remember God told him, there's a prostitute down the street, go marry her. And then she's going to have kids. She's going to have a daughter. I want you to name her Lo Ruhamah. So Lo is Hebrew for negative, Ruhamah is love. So what's he going to name his daughter?
No love.
Not loved. Oh, well, that's nice. And then she's going to have a son. She has a son. He says, okay, I want you to name him Lo Ami. Lo again is the negative. Ami is people. So that son is
Not my
not my people.
People.
Pretty tough life, right? That your whole life is an object lesson like that.
And she left him.
And then she left him. Yep. So that was that. I think they had a first child. She left him, then came back, and he had those. I mean, it's not much fun, right? Sometimes, but these prophets were so valuable because they kept the people connected to God. Before there was a written word, they were speaking God's words to the people. And so Isaiah, think of how many prophecies he had toward the future, especially looking at the coming of Christ. Or Daniel, he's the apocalyptic book in the Old Testament, right? He looks all the way to the end of time, like the book of Revelation. So the prophets are kind of, all kinds of a whole different mixture. So we're going to look at the prophet Jonah. And to do that, where else would we start? But, come on up, there we go. But, come on screen. But with Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, good place to start if we're going to do the prophet Jonah, right? So just listen to this and note the words that are bold and underlined, okay? It's only 272 words. Somebody time it. I'm interested. I never time how long the Gettysburg Address is, okay? Here we go. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come to dedicate a portion of that field as a final resting place for those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men living and dead who struggled here have consecrated it, far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. Oops.
About 65 seconds.
I missed the last part of it. Here we go. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion. That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. Okay, there we go. So,
About a minute and a half.
okay, just about a minute and a half. That's all it was. Many people consider this greatest speech ever given, and I want you to look at. It's just noble language, isn't it? Even starting at the beginning. What are the first words? 70 years ago.
Years ago.
Such a noble start. Lincoln could have just said, hey, you know what? 87 years ago, it doesn't quite have the impact, right? But what happened 87 years ago?
Declaration of Independence.
Declaration of Independence. So, do you know in Lincoln's day, the most important thing at that time people always talked about was the signing of the Constitution, okay? And that was signed on June 21st, 1788. And Lincoln changed things because, so here we are in the Civil War, right? And the Battle of Gettysburg took place in July, first few days of July in 1863. So this is November 1863, that fall, and they're going to dedicate a part of this battlefield, which is still there today, right? Raise your hand if you've been to Gettysburg. Yeah, it's pretty neat, isn't it? And it was a pivotal battle of the Civil War. They call it the high water mark of the Confederacy because it was all the way into Pennsylvania, southern Pennsylvania, and things were going his way until the Battle of Gettysburg happened. And true or false, Lee never meant to fight at Gettysburg.
True.
Probably true.
Yeah. There was some guys went into town to get some shoes. What was it? The Union soldiers, I think, went into town to find some new shoes or boots or something. And the Confederates came into town too, and they just started shooting. And Lee comes over a hill and he goes, "What's all that shooting?" And so the Battle of Gettysburg had started. But that war was a pivotal point in the war between the states. But the way Lincoln starts that by going back to the signing of the Declaration of Independence is so important because that was, as he put it, the birth of a nation, right? He talks about that in birth and conceived. And here, let me go back to, look at come on back here. Look at the words he uses, right? Dedicated 6 times, conceived twice, consecrated, devotion, created, honored, hallowed. It's either going to be new birth so that we don't perish from the earth, and that these men would not have died in vain. Just, very, what would you call it? I don't know, noble language, right? That really caught everybody's attention. Well, not immediately, right? In the press immediately, there was some guy talked for, I forget who it was, before Lincoln, before the president, some guy talked for, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes, an hour, just huge, back then they did long speeches. And so the president's almost became an afterthought. His speech was panned in the news media. And here we are all these years later, people consider it one of the greatest speeches ever written. He either wrote it all on the train from DC up to Gettysburg, or maybe he started it in DC and then wrote it as he went up. But the key is he changes it because at that time, as I said, they're looking at the Constitution, the signing of the Constitution. By 1788, you're talking about all these people representing different sovereign states agreeing to join together as the United States. But in 1776, it was people coming together from colonies, and it was like the whole new birth of a nation. Right? So here's the preamble to the Declaration of Independence. How many of you had to memorize that in grade school? And I meant we did. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are what?
Life, liberty, and pursuit
Pursuit
of
of
happiness.
Yes.
There you go, right? And so, and the preamble of the Constitution is different. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. We had to memorize that too. I don't quite have it all memorized anymore. But now you've got sovereign states coming together, and I guess that means at some point they could decide, okay, we're going to split off again, which is exactly what happened in the Civil War. So Lincoln wants to go past the Constitution back to, folks, here's where we started. It was the birth of a nation. We came together. God is a big part of all of this. And so he uses that kind of language in the Gettysburg Address. Okay. Second. Gary Wills wrote a book about Lincoln at Gettysburg, a very well-written book, and he says this: Lincoln gave people a new past to live with that would change their future indefinitely. So he helped the people to step outside of that current tragedy, the Civil War, and go back to the conception and birth of the United States and say, look, folks, this is what we're really all about. So now we come to Jonah. Along with Ruth, known as the most ornate Hebrew in all of the Old Testament. One of the commentators says Jonah is an ornate tapestry of rhetorical beauty. And so Jonah does kind of the same thing that President Lincoln did. He resets the past by reversing the biblical narrative for the first time. Okay, what do I mean by that? Well, here's the biblical narrative in the Old Testament, right? The Pentateuch, that's the first 5 books of the Bible. That's what Moses wrote down. And so throughout the Old Testament, you know, they've got those 5 books. And Genesis then tells how everything started, right? Genesis 1 and 2 is the creation of the world. Exodus 20, verse 11. See some of the well, let's see. Yeah, somebody wants to, if you have your Bible with you and you want to go to Genesis, and maybe a couple other people can read some of these verses. But in Exodus 20, you know what Exodus 20 is? Remember, that's the 10 Commandments. And in the midst of the 10 Commandments, when God talks about remembering the Sabbath day, the 3rd commandment, he says, 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you, nor your son or daughter, nor your manservant or maidservant, nor your animals, nor the alien within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that is in them. But he rested on the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the 7th day and made it holy. So all through the Old Testament, here we are at Mount Sinai in this covenant with God. We're going all the way back to Genesis, all the way back to the creation of the world. From there, we go to Noah. Okay, why is Noah significant?
Because he was the only one saved from the flood, he and his family.
He and his family.
They were faithful.
Yet the world had become so wicked. Would somebody like to read Genesis 9, 8 to 11?
I have it.
How about if you raise hands, and Pastor Andrew, if I can ask you, just call on somebody, and that way we can kind of change around folks that are going to share. Okay, who's got a hand up?
I do.
Go ahead, Barb.
Barb.
Okay. And again, God said to Noah and his sons, I'm going to make a solemn promise to you and to everyone who will live after you. This includes the birds and the animals that came out of the boat. I promise everything created, every living creature, that the earth and those living on it will never again be destroyed by a flood.
So God makes a covenant with Noah and with the earth, right? Never again will there be a flood like this. And so there's God's involvement kind of doing recreation. And later he tells Noah, now you're going to go forth, fill the earth and subdue it. Sounds kind of familiar, right? That's the same thing God said to Adam and Eve. He says to Adam and Eve, he says, no, kind of have a restart. Then we get to Abraham. And we won't read all of these, but if somebody's got Genesis 12, 1, 2, and 3.
Hey, is that you raising your hand?
Okay, yes, I've got it. The call of Abram. The Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people, and your father's household, to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all the peoples on earth will be blessed.
Thank you, Tammy. So here's the covenant with Abraham. And somebody coined the little ditty, how out of God to choose the Jews. But out of all the nations on the earth, all the people on the earth, God says, Abraham, you're the one. It's going to be you. It's going to be your descendants through whom I'm going to carry on all the way to that promise to bring forth a Messiah. Now, all the nations will be blessed through Abraham, but we go to it's Abraham, right? And then Isaac, his son, same promise to him. Somebody have Genesis 17, 19?
I do.
Go ahead, Barb.
God said, no, but Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his offsprings after him.
So from Abraham, the covenant language repeated to Isaac, and then his son Jacob. Somebody have Genesis 28.
Linda, it's showing your hand is raised. Does that mean you're desiring to read?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, Genesis 28, 10 through 15.
Sure.
Jacob left Beersheba and went toward Haran, and he came to a certain place and stayed there that night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head and lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and the top of it reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord, the God of Abraham, your father, and God of Isaac. The land on which you lie, I will give to you and your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you.
Thank you. So did you hear some of just even the same words, right? That God had used with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And then Jacob gets a new name. That's chapter 32, verse 28. He says, his name now will be Israel. So that's where we get the name of Israel. So everything in the Old Testament goes from the God of all creation, creates everything, kind of a restart with Noah because the folks are so evil. And I just put that in there because that'll be very important for the book of Jonah. And then you have the Jewish people, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Israel, Israelites, and that's the chosen people. So it goes from all the real general all the way down to the specific, okay? Guess what Jonah's going to do? He does like Abraham Lincoln did. He takes it from where we are, the kind of this real specific thing, and goes all the way back to creation to remind the people that God is the God of all creation, that he's come from all, that he has come, that he loves all people. He's created all people, not just the Jews. All right. And that was like a new message. I mean, he's the only prophet solely called to go to somebody other than the Israelites. His ministry was not to the Israelites at all. He's called to go to somebody else. Okay, to the
He
Ninevites.
said, I don't want to go.
Yep.
Yeah.
That'll be a significant thing. That's right. So Jonah, when he's on the boat and they're trying to figure it out, he says, what's going on here? And if you, I will encourage you to have your Bible open to Jonah. Then, as we do get going, we'll really get started next week. But just I'm just finding this. The minor prophets go so fast, you have to look quicker. You miss it as you're going flipping through. So in Jonah chapter 1 verse 9, as the sea is getting really bad, they ask him, okay, what's going on? He says, I am a Hebrew and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the land. And of course that gets him real nervous when he says his God made the sea and the land. And this whole connection of God and Noah, we're going to look at it. It's all through the entire book of Jonah, the whole book of prophecy. And that he is the God of all creation. He says, you're the God who made the sea and the land. So we always talk about the Sinai Covenant, and that's a hugely important covenant, right? But it's not God's first covenant. The first covenant God makes isn't Sinai. The first covenant God makes isn't even with Abraham. The first covenant is the one that we heard before, God making this promise to Noah and all creation that I'll never destroy the earth again in a flood. And one other little interesting ditty. Jesus only ever compares himself to one prophet in the Old Testament, and it's Jonah. Without even looking it up. What's he talking about? Remember?
Dying and raising in 3 days.
Yeah, he says,
Being
just
in the belly of the whale.
In the belly of the whale for 3 days, I'll be in the belly of the earth for 3 days, right? And then he can rise again. So, which is important too, because in modern critical looking at study of the Bible, everybody says, Jonah was just a myth, just a fable, just kind of made up. Well, not if you read Matthew and you see what Jesus says, right? He uses Jonah, a historical person, as an example to kind of show what's going to happen and in his life and what he's going to do for us. So before we start, I want to spend some time doing something called sampling. Now, this is from, let me get my book here. We have this Concordia commentary series, and there's the book of Jonah. The blue ones, I've got them in my office. By the way, we have a series, thanks to Rob Crawford, in memory of his dad. We've got a number of those now in the vicar's office, and those are for our vicars to use. They're for any of you, if you're doing research, you want to read more in depth, if you want to use it, please check it out so we know, or leave your name something so we know who took it. So you make sure you bring it back and we don't lose those. But Dr. Reed Lessing wrote the commentary in the book of Jonah. And I found this very interesting, and I just thought this would be a way to introduce this too. Sampling. Sampling is something where you take something from one thing and you see, wow, look how it applies from that situation to this situation. And he's got 18 of these that it's just fascinating, the connections between Noah, because Noah now is, the kind of the new start on the earth, and it is still all nations, it's everybody. And that's what Jonah is saying, that God is the God of everybody, even though Jonah doesn't like that. So we start with 120 years. So somebody wants to get Genesis chapter 6. We're going to go through a bunch of stuff in Genesis chapter 6. And when you look at that, this is right after we've got the Genesis chapter 6 starts the discussion about the flood, right after we've had Cain and Abel, and then we have the whole table, we have a whole listing of this, but then we get right into talking about the flood. All right, so Genesis 6:3, what's the 120 years?
That's the length that somebody could live.
Yeah, that was the length of time that a person lived, okay? So we're talking about how long people lived. Jonah 4:11, the last verse of his little book, how many people are in Nineveh? 120,000. Kind of interesting. Some of them are just kind of interesting little ditties. Others are going to be more significant. This is a big one. The wickedness of man, right? Why did God decide to destroy the world?
Because it was wicked. It was so wicked. There was only Jonah and his family.
Yeah, and the word there really is just the violence that was part of that world. And in Jonah chapter 1, verse 2, God says to him, go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it because its wickedness has come up before me. Same word, okay? So the wickedness of the flood, wickedness of Jonah's time. What do you think's going on today?
They're wicked.
No kind of the same wickedness, right? Yeah.
Except the Ninevites were really, really, really kind of bad.
Yeah, and that's that word, that just wickedness, violence. You know, there's different words for breaking commandments, for breaking God's law. Okay, there's one word that's kind of like you're trying to keep God's law, which hopefully we Christians are, and it's like you've got a target out there, and you're going to shoot your arrow at the target, and you miss. Okay, so we want to do what's right, but sometimes, you know, we sin. So that's one word for sinning. Then there's a couple others, but the worst word, and the way I've seen this pictured is, there's the 10 Commandments, the 2 stone tablets, and a guy standing there with a pile of rocks, and he's just throwing rocks at those stone tablets, you know, trying to destroy them. That kind of wickedness, violence. That's what we're talking about here at Noah's day, and also the Ninevites in Jonah's day. Okay. God is sorry. What's he sorry about in Genesis 6:6?
That he
Probably
made
that
man.
That he created man.
Sorry, he said, sorry I ever did. Right? Jonah, even after he finally goes and does what he's supposed to do, is not sorry. Okay, just the opposite. Once finally he goes and does what God tells him, and the people repent, he can't stand it. And we'll spend some time talking about that. Obviously, in the flood, people and animals are both important, right? God doesn't just save Noah and his family, goes to great lengths, right? Sending all the 2 by 2, all the animals, so the animals can repopulate the earth as well. In Jonah chapter 3, verse 7, the king of Nineveh issues this decree. And he says, do not let any man or beast, herd or flock taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink. And they're all going to sit down in sackcloth. I don't know how they put sackcloth on the oxen, but in other words, he even includes all the animals in their repenting to the God of heaven. Violence, you know, there's the violence part of it again. And in chapter 3, as the king talks about his own people, he says, let everyone call urgently on God, let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Because again, and it was a very violent people. And so we have that theme. Evil. Of course, everybody was evil. Nobody followed God, Genesis chapter 6. And 7 times throughout just the little 48 verses, that's all that Jonah is. But 7 times that word evil, evil, evil. How about the ark? God uses the ark to save Noah, right? Did anybody ever see years ago, Bill Cosby?
Oh, yeah.
His thing about with Noah,
I have
Noah's
it
out
on
there
our-
working, he's sawing away, and all. Ding, Noah. What? What do you want? I want you to build an ark. And he goes, okay. What's an
What's
ark? But God has him build this big boat, right? And that's how Noah and all the animals are saved. That's how God saves his creation so they can come out of the ark and start over again. And Jonah, right off the bat in verse 3, Jonah runs away. He went down to Joppa. He found a ship bound for Joppa. So he jumps on a boat. So how is he intending to get away and start a new life?
He's going to flee to the ends of the earth.
On a boat. Yep. And he's going to do it on a boat, right?
Mm-hmm.
How long does it rain?
40
40
days.
days and 40 nights.
How long is Jonah in the belly of the whale?
3 days.
Oh, 3 days.
3 days.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I got my numbers mixed up. He goes to, when he goes down there finally to preach, on the first day Jonah started in the city, proclaimed 40 more days, and Nineveh will be overturned. So they've got 40 days and 40 nights to repent, or God's going to destroy the city. Okay? The flood waters and the great deep, we'll read the whole account of this poetic language. Man, you can just see the boat being thrown back and forth in a terrible wind, and it gets worse, and as Noah's getting blown around. Those flood waters, wiped out the people of the earth. And now the flood waters, or the waters of the sea, are threatening to wipe out this boat and kill Jonah. Great. That word is used 14 times in the whole story about Noah and Jonah's book of prophecy. But that word is never used of Jonah. So you heard this before, right? 2 great truths. There is a God, and you ain't him, right? Jonah, sorry. And so poor Jonah is a prophet, but boy, he really struggles with what he's supposed to do. And it's just interesting that the word great is used of different ways in his book of prophecy, but Jonah's never called great. Then the waters in the dry land, of course, are very important, because dry land finally means what? When Noah's sending out the birds, and finally the dove comes back with a twig, and then the one doesn't come back, right?
Means they're able to start over.
Finally get out, we can start over. Yep. Jonah spends 3 days in the belly of the whale, and then what happens?
He vomited him out.
Gets spit up on dry land, it says, so that he is given a chance for a new start. Same words. The wind blows. Who's got Genesis 8, verse 1? Read that to us, would you? We have a hand up for Genesis 8:1.
Not seeing one.
But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded.
And so the wind blows and the waters recede, right? That's part of drying the land so that they can come out. Jonah chapter 1, verse 4, after Jonah disobeys, the Lord sends a great wind, same words as in Noah's time, sends a great wind on the sea and this violent storm to stop him from fleeing. And then in chapter 4, verse 8, after Jonah preaches and the people repent and he's all upset, there's Noah just sitting there all kind of, sitting on the pity pot. When the sun rose, God provided a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head so that he grew faint and he just wanted to die. So God uses the wind to accomplish his purposes, doesn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And then the dove. You know about the dove in Genesis. Isn't that interesting? Jonah's name means
Dove.
yeah. And so there's a few more. We'll continue that. We'll continue next week looking at those and then start into the text itself. But here's the theme of Jonah, right? God is a God of second chances. God kind of just repents that he's even made his world. He's sorry. And so he sends this flood to destroy all his creation except for Noah and the animals. And kind of, reboot. We're going to start over. Jonah, when he's told by God, here's what I want you to do, goes the opposite direction. And when God deals with him, and Jonah's in there praying 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, what happens? God gives him a second chance. That's our God, right? He's a God of second chances. He's a God of redemption. And that's the story of Jonah. And we'll see how that story plays out. Okay. So we're going to close with the Lord's Prayer, and I'll tell you how we're going to do it. Pastor Andrew, would you mute everybody, please? And okay. And if you see your screen's not muted, either mute your screen or say it silently. All right. There we go. So I'll say the Lord's Prayer. We'll all say it together, but if we're muted, we'll be able to say it. Otherwise, all our voices, it gets kind of messed up. But let's pray the Lord's Prayer together, shall we? Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Okay, so you can unmute now, and something that I haven't figured out yet is there is a thing you can do with a Zoom meeting where you can say, okay, we're going to split off and groups of 4, and the Zoom will automatically put you in a little room of 4, just 4 of you, and you can talk about something, then we can come back together. We haven't figured out how to do that yet. If we can do that, conversations kind of, that'll be fun. So we'll see if we can figure that out. But for now, if some of you would like to talk,
what they asked you to do.
Let me, we sent out the newsletter. Did anybody get the newsletter yesterday?
Not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not
Well, it should come on, I think, I thought that was too soon. Because if I understand right, all the mail goes from here to Florida, then back to Macon. But anyway, we sent out a newsletter. Hopefully you'll get it Monday or Tuesday at the latest. We are going to have church again.